later today, but remember, I told you I'm short-handed and that I've got some out-of-town guests coming in visiting. No, ma'am, I won't forget. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Goodbye. Come on in, come on in.
Chief, sorry to interrupt your busy day. I know you've got a lot to do, but could you take a few minutes of your time and give us a talk?
Come on in and get out of the cold. Gather around, make yourselves comfortable. Good afternoon. My name is George W. McCulloch, and welcome to New Albany. I'm the Chief of Police here. I want to tell you a little bit about two fine officers who we have lost in the last 18 months. Captain Thomas J. Cannon on June 26, 1921, and Patrol Officer Otto Welch, December 15th last year. Both these officers served New Albany very well, and it's really a shame and really been rough, because these were fine officers who we had, and they served us through one of our darkest times when the cyclone of 1917 struck. Let's talk about Captain Cannon first. He was the son of Irish immigrants, but he was born in New York, came here as a child. This was home to him. He joined the force in 1872 and was chief for many years, and was night chief at the time when his life was lost. Well, he looked after New Albany like this was his home, and it was. He treated the people well. He was even, as a patrolman, he would go and clean the crossings of ice and mud with a hoe. This made the ladies happy, trying to get across in their dresses. Let's talk a little bit about the terrible way he lost his life. It happened 2:15 early Sunday morning on June 26, 1921. And it was after his shift was over and he was headed home to 1504 East Spring. Had just crossed 13th Street where the trolley tracks were coming down Spring and crossed over, one set crossed over and went south to Main Street at 13th. He was walking along the curb right in front of 1306, which was Dr. Bird's house, when an auto car, a motor car driven by James White, struck him from the rear, ran up over him, and pinned him to the ground. The impact was such that the motor on the forward runabout stalled. The two passengers that was with Mr. White got out, helped them pick the car off of Captain Cannon, set off the side, and then they picked up his limp body and placed him on the sidewalk. Just as the noise had aroused the neighbors around there. So they started to look out and see what was going on. The three restarted the motor car and drove away. Captain Cannon's wife was alerted, and he was taken to St. Edward's Hospital and pronounced dead. From all appearances, this was an accident that probably was unavoidable. But for some reason, the three decided to just leave the scene and drive off. Captain Cannon was about 70, and he was just 2 blocks from home when the car struck him and killed him. They held the services at Cannon's home and buried him in Fairview Cemetery. Let me share a little bit about Otto Welch. He was a son of a steamboat captain, one of 11 children, and had worked for the telephone company before joining the force in 1915, which the telephone company had helped him a little bit, because once when he was younger patrolman, he had to climb a pole and fix a fire alarm box at the corner of Main and Pearl. In 1916, Otto was involved in a shooting incident that drew him a temporary suspension, but nearly lost his life in the goings-on. He and another officer were investigating an intoxicated group. They walked up on him. One of the group drew a knife, slashed at Otto Welch, and it cut his coat, but struck his badge, which probably not only kept him from being injured, but saved his life. Both officers then pulled their revolvers out and shot the man dead. Both officers were later cleared of any wrongdoing in the incident. Otto Welch was a man of many firsts. One of them was in May of 1920. Just welcomed the arrival of a first airplane. It was housed in the Mason-Dixon Airlines. Less than a week later, a man came, forged a $135 check at the Second National Bank. It was in Mr. Mason's name. Mr. Mason then came forward and offered to fly an officer to Salem, where the man had headed to escape. Otto Welch volunteered. He got on the airplane, flew to Salem, got there before the man got there, arrested him, and brought him back, thus becoming the first New Albany police officer to fly in an airplane, arrest a criminal, and also bring him back. He was in many other firsts that he was involved with, and one of them was the fact that he was the first motorcycle officer in New Albany. But his last first was not one that anyone would want to envy. He was the first and only officer to lose his life in the line of duty. It was about 5 p.m. on December 15th. He was on his way home to 2114 East Elm Street. And as was his custom, he would stop by and call in at the firehouse number 5 at Culberson and Thomas. He was almost there when the rear of his sidecar struck another vehicle. The sidecar and the motorcycle flipped over onto Otto Welch, breaking his neck. He was carried into the firehouse by residents in the neighborhood, where he died 30 minutes later. He left his wife, Irene, and a daughter, Catherine. Now let me touch on just real briefly a most bizarre crime that happened in New Albany that involved both these officers. John Crawford had been arrested in Evansville for stealing a motor car. He was being transferred to Jeffersonville Reformatory. But he was no stranger to New Albany and the Reformatory, because in 1917, while he was there, he came and helped pick up the debris after the 1917 cyclone here. Crawford was being escorted by Vanderbilt County Charles Rule and newly deputized William Engel. But unbeknownst to them, there was an escape plan in the works. They had made their trip on the Southern Railway, had gotten off the station at West First, and was coming up to Spring Street between Pearl and Bank to get on the interurban to take it to Jeffersonville. While Rule was in getting passage, a lady friend of Crawford slipped Crawford a .32 caliber revolver. Before anyone could react, bang! He had shot Engel in the back of the head. Crawford then, while shackled to another prisoner, escaped down to the river on East 3rd Street, down to Lewis Eiler's home, forced his way in, but then Eiler subdued him, took the revolver, and turned him over to the authorities, which they were taken to jail and transferred to Jeffersonville rather quickly, because that was for their own safety. We didn't need a lynching on my watch. Special Deputy Engel was taken to St. Edward's, where he died the next morning without gaining consciousness. Well, it looks like our time together is over today. Thank you for visiting. You are welcome back anytime, providing it's not to be put in my...
Chief, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. Our condolences on the loss of your good men.
Thank you very much.
And don't forget to go check on Mrs. Smith.
I've got to talk to Mrs. Smith.